Hi, I'm Detective Unknown.
Hi, I'm Sergeant Backflip.
And I'm Inspector Home Run.
And we're the Teenage Super Sleuths, myth-busting some of today's greatest scientific hoaxes.
This is Johnny on the Spot, science reporter for the Real News Network. You won't find any fake news here.
Ladies and gentlemen, the story you are about to see is true. The names have been changed to protect the innocent.
Any similarity to persons living or dead is purely coincidental. All characters and events in this show, even though based on real people, are entirely fictional. All celebrity voices are impersonated poorly. We're coming to you today from the Bat Cave. The Teenage Super Sleuths have had to go into hiding because of the scientific discoveries that they have been making are a threat to the status quo. All right, here we are again with another episode of the Teenage Super Sleuths. And what they did is they contacted me this week because from what I understand is they've been doing some work in the dark web doing their research on climate change. And they were working on some legal work, and they had passed on some of their ideas onto somebody else working on some legal work, and that got passed on to somebody else who was interested in this topic. And what you were telling me was you were trying to help them understand an easy way to show a judge that the CO2 doesn't impact temperatures. And when you were doing this research, you found out that NASA erased the data that you had been using, and you couldn't use it?
Yeah, so there's a NASA website where you could click on points and see the graphs over time.
Yeah.
But the first point we were going to use, the main point of it, the one that proved it, it was the most obvious point, disappears.
And so what you were telling me that you were kind of spreading the word about that to some of your insiders, and suddenly it disappeared. So maybe you've got a spy watching what you're doing because they knew you were tampering with the NASA website.
Maybe we got one in our own ranks.
You might have one in your own ranks.
Might.
So
I'm
once
watching
again,
you,
okay.
Unknown.
So once again, what you do is you say you go to the NASA website. This is the GIST website. Okay. You said you were telling people to go and you wanted to look at the unadjusted data because that's just simply the raw data, and that's real scientists look at the raw data.
Yeah, you don't want to look at any fabricated or any adjusted stuff.
And so you're going back to 1902, and so you changed this to 1902. Oh, and you said you want to make sure you use the Chrome browser on this, right?
Yeah, because the Microsoft browser is a little bit glitchy.
Yeah, it gets a little quirky. You guys are high level computer guys. GIST. So you go to the GIST website, right? You change this to 1902, unadjusted data, and you hit update, right? And what you were doing was you had found the ideal weather station to disprove global warming.
Click on update.
And when you hit update, watch what happens. All those weather stations disappear. But what you're saying was the one that you were going to use in the lawsuit disappeared.
Yeah, it was called Alice Springs.
Alice Springs. And so what you're telling me is, fortunately, you guys were filming this type of a video to demonstrate it, to teach people, and suddenly it disappeared. But you still have video evidence of this, so you can prove NASA, no ifs, ands, or buts, is hiding data to the public.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. This is hard to believe. But you're telling me you got evidence, and so this is it. Right here is Alice Springs. And you can see 1902. See how it's version 3? Okay? When they went to version 4, they just casually erased that one.
This is July instead of August.
Okay? Well, it doesn't matter. It's 1902. And then, but you're saying this is what the graphic is. This is the smoking gun graphic that you can no longer produce. Is that right, Professor Backflip?
That is right.
If you haven't have this saved, you cannot access it.
You can't go. You're telling me I cannot go to NASA and reproduce this. What you're saying, why this is so damaging, is this shows 140 years of a station with a 0 BI, which is brightness index.
Yes.
That's kind of like it shows you that this is unaffected by the urban heat island effect.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so 140 years, if you can find stations that are unaffected by the urban heat island effect, you can show that over the last 140 years, CO2 has had no impact on temperatures.
Yeah.
And why you're saying that is so dangerous is because what that proves is that Michael Mann's temperature chart is a measure of the urban heat island effect, not the impact of CO2 on temperatures. They got a Nobel Prize for that, and you're going to debunk a Nobel Prize winner?
Oh, yeah.
That's crazy. You guys are, 14 years old again?
14.
Yes.
And Professor Home Run, you're what, 14?
Yes.
And Professor Unknown, you're 14?
Yes.
And Professor Backflip, you're what, 15?
15. Yep.
15. So all of you teenagers, are you telling me you're smarter than Michael Mann, a Nobel Prize winner?
Not just smarter. Much
you can
smarter.
debunk him. So you could actually, if this turns out to be true, maybe they'll give the Nobel Prize to you instead of Michael Mann. And better yet, they won't give it to Greta Thunberg because she didn't do any real science. She does political. Maybe she could get a political science Nobel Prize, but not hard science like you guys are doing.
She should get a lot.
Okay. Well, my understanding is that maybe we should set Professor Unknown up with Greta for a date so we can see if two opposites can do in fact attract, right? So maybe the people watching this video can make in the comments, should we set Professor Unknown up with Greta Thunberg, right? And they could discuss global warming over a nice romantic dinner somewhere in maybe Paris, right? Okay. However, what you're telling me, once again, is you're telling me if I go to NASA, I cannot reproduce this. Now, you already showed me that the one can't be reproduced, right? So if we go back, and sure enough, if you did that, 1902, Alice Springs does disappear. And because you said that one was July, let's just do July just to demonstrate, okay? And let's just hit update. It doesn't pop up. But you said you can get some weather stations that are close if you go 1960, right? And so let's update it again.
Yeah,
and
you could.
Booyah, right? And so look at there, Alice Springs Airport. So I go down here to get neighbors, and look what happens.
You would think Alice Springs would be right next to
I
it,
would think
right?
so. Alice Springs Airport, Alice Springs Post Office, but no Alice Springs. And none of them go back, none of them are continuous from 1880 to the current. They've broken them into two, so you can use Alice Springs Airport or Post Office, and you'll see that doesn't help them either. That shows downtrend in temperatures.
Yeah.
That's a downtrend. No one, so they tried to cover it up with an even worse chart. Now these people at NASA are a joke. All right. Well, bottom line is what you're telling me is you're going to publish the video right after this video. So keep watching this video.
Well, we can put the other video at the back.
We'll publish that as a standalone, but we're going to we'll splice it into this video. So now that they've seen what NASA has now, they're going to see what NASA used to have, and they're going to have documented video evidence that NASA is concealing data to the public that is damaging to their climate change. More importantly, it debunks the Michael Mann and the hockey stick. Okay.
Yes.
And so once again, these are two 14-year-olds and a 15-year-old who have basically debunked a Nobel Prize winner. And down in the comments, please make comments of whether or not we think that Professor Unknown should be going out with Greta Thunberg so they can discuss their differences.
We should put in a poll.
Okay, we are here once again for another episode of the Teenage Super Sleuths. We're here with Professor Home Run, Professor Backflip, and Professor Unknown. And they've called me with some information that they have developed what they consider to be one of the best high school science fair projects out there for basically debunking global warming. Now, if you can see the chart that we're looking at, he's taken me to Penn State University, and you said, Professor Unknown, you said this is where Dr. Mann is a professor?
Yes.
Okay, so this is when it says down here about Mann, Penn State. This is the actual guy. He's at Penn State, and this is his actual chart?
Yeah.
You got the microphone doesn't see you nodding your head.
Yes.
Okay. And Professor Backflip, you're what, 14 years old? Now, you're telling me that this Nobel Prize winning professor out there, you can prove that his chart is wrong.
Yes, I can.
Yes.
Professor Home Run, is that what you're telling me you can do?
Yes.
You're telling me that the guy who made this chart doesn't have a clue. That's
Somewhat.
Somewhat. Okay. And what you said was that the dead giveaway was that, first of all, his chart doesn't show a medieval warming period or a little ice age, something that we know from archaeological evidence existed. And so that was the first thing. The other thing is that the CO2 actually increased during this time period for the previous 1,000 years, hit or miss, but he shows temperature decreasing. So right off the bat, his chart doesn't implicate CO2 just from his own look. But you said the real dead giveaway was quantum physics?
Yeah.
Professor Unknown, are you telling me that you're with your 12-year-old PhD, you've been studying quantum physics, and this thing any physicist with a degree like yours would be able to identify there's a serious problem with this?
Yes, quantum physics does not support this chart.
And what you were saying is that this thing doglegs in 1902, and you were telling me that nothing about the quantum physics of a CO2 molecule, and you said something about its absorption of long wave infrared between 13 and 18 microns. You're saying that it has a logarithmic decay. I don't even know what that means, but it sounded pretty impressive. But you're telling me because there's a logarithmic decay with CO2, that there's nothing about a CO2 molecule that would cause a dogleg to go upward. If anything, it would gradually decline?
Yeah, the quantum physics simply do not support that.
Wow. And so, and you also said that nothing occurred to CO2 that changed its trend back in 1902 either. So if anything, you were saying that Professor Mann's chart rules out CO2 as the cause?
Yes.
Wow, that is absolutely fascinating. Well, but you're saying, but you have even a better way that anybody in a high school science class, or basically an elementary school from what you're telling me, could easily debunk this chart.
Yes, anyone who could speak could debunk this.
Okay, anyone who wants to take the time to seek the truth, which is what science is all about, could easily debunk this, right?
Yes.
And what you were telling me was what's strange about this is this last period that goes from 1902 to 2000, and you're saying that this is instrumental record. You're saying previous to 1902, Professor Mann decided not to use any thermometer data, which is odd because thermometers are the way most people measure temperature.
Yeah, when you measure temperature, you don't look at a tree ring.
Yeah.
You stick a
You
thermometer.
and you were telling me we have instrumental records that go back to the mid-1600s in central England?
Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty fascinating. So what you're telling me is he's showing temperatures increasing from minus 0.5 all the way up to about 1.75, so a full 1.25 degrees Celsius. This isn't Fahrenheit, this is Celsius. That's a big move over the last, basically, 100 years or so.
Yeah.
Right? And so you're telling me we have a way for basically students in science classes to pretty much prove their teachers are wrong, because this is what you call, this is undercover type science, right? You're telling me this is stuff that you do without anybody knowing about it, because you do this in the classroom without your teacher knowing about it, because if the teacher knows this kind of information, she might give you an F, is what you're telling me, right?
Yeah, you'll get kicked out.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go debunk this chart made by Professor Mann, Michael Mann, at the Penn State University. And so you said what we have to do is go to the GISS data site, and you said GISS is the Goddard Institute of Space Studies, NASA?
Yes.
We're going to go, you guys know how to use the NASA website and you're 12 years old?
Yes, it's very simple.
Wow. Okay, well, let's go take a look. And you say it's simple. It may be simple for someone like you, but you said go here, and this is the data.gis.nasa.gov, the GISS temp station data undercarriage V3. And what it does is it takes you to the data set where they have all of the weather stations around the globe. That's pretty fascinating that someone your age even knows how to do that.
Yeah, you can see all the temperature sets.
And you said that you want to use, you said Chrome when you use this, right? Because these tables don't work right?
Yes.
And so what you said is you want to change this to 1902, right? Yep. And you said you want to use the
adjusted data.
Unadjusted
we
data.
We don't want any sketchy stuff going on here.
Okay, we're going to use unadjusted data.
Authentic stuff.
Okay, and now we're going to update this. Right? And what that's going to do is it's going to bring and reveal all the stations that existed back in 1902, so we can see, is Dr. Mann's last 100 years consistent with what a thermometer would tell you. Now, you tell me it's not that quite easy, because you were telling me something about a BI measurement.
Yes. So the BI is the input of the urban heat island effect.
Okay, and so when you're telling me that what you were going to look for is a station that has a BI of 10 or less, right?
Yes, we don't want the urban heat island effect to have too much of an impact.
Okay, now urban heat island effect is like someone there might be a weather station there, and they might build a road next to it, and all of a sudden the road gets real hot, but it has nothing to do with CO2. It has to do with the fact that you put a road next to a weather station. So what you're measuring there is the warming of the road, not CO2, right?
Yes.
So what we're looking for is a weather station that's in the middle of absolutely nowhere, right?
Yep.
Okay, and I'm looking at this chart, and look here. That looks like something in the middle of nowhere. It's in the middle of Australia. It's called Alice Springs, and you see how it has that BI of zero down here?
Yep.
So,
And-
so you're telling me this is an ideal one, right?
Yes, and also look at the bottom at the years. This goes from 1880 up to 2019.
Oh, so this is
we
the
get
perfect one,
So
right?
we get a fairly long range.
We get to cover the range that Dr. Mann said temperatures increased by 1.25 degrees.
Yes.
So if we click on this and temperatures really did go up by 1.25 degrees, we should see a temperature chart that goes up 1.25 degrees, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, because you were telling me that CO2 is the same level here in the middle of Australia as it is over here in England.
Yes,
It was-
CO2 doesn't differ throughout areas.
It's a constant, is what you're telling me.
Yes.
And in science, a constant means that it really can't cause a variation. That's why they're called constants, right?
Yes.
And so what you're telling me is if I click on this thing, I should see a chart that increases by 1.75 if Dr. Mann is right.
If his theory is
if your 12-year-old theory is correct, and I click on this, I should see a temperature chart that didn't change over the last 100 years?
Yes,
That's
that's
hard to
what-
believe.
that's what you should see.
That's really hard to believe, though. Are you telling me that temperatures haven't changed in the last 100 years after
I-
all I've been told?
I believe that this will prove that they've not
We're just going
changed.
to randomly select a weather station in the middle of nowhere that's been shielded from the heat island effect for 100 years, and you're telling me you're going to show me no warming.
Yes.
I find that hard
Exactly.
to believe. I find that unbelievably hard to believe. But you have the PhD, and you're the one that's telling Nobel Prize winner Michael Mann that he doesn't have a clue what he's doing.
Yep.
Okay, and so I'm going to click on that.
And also, there's no oceans nearby that would affect the temperature.
That's right. You want to make sure that's in the middle of nowhere. You didn't want it near the ocean because ocean currents can impact the temperatures as well.
Yes.
Well, let's just take a look at what this weather station looks like.
So if you're
Whoa! Wait a minute. This is Alice Springs, and we go back to 1902, and this is the temperature range of 1902. It peaked out around 22 degrees, it looks like. And this is where the current level is. It's at 22 degrees exact. It's below where it was in 1902.
yes,
Holy cow! Now, you were telling me something really fascinating about this stuff, is that the adjusted data that you found almost always
yeah.
lowers
so
the distance.
let's take a look at the adjusted data.
Let's see what happens when they look at that.
Huh.
This is the unadjusted, which is flat as a board, and then when they adjust it, it gives an upslope. But even so, even with the adjustment, look, their adjustment still doesn't have the current temperatures above the level
Yeah,
it was in 1902.
Because they're not
This is-
adjusting it so much that it's unreasonable. They're trying
Oh
to
my
tweak
gosh,
it.
but look at that. But even when they did that, if you take a look, the level in 1902 or actually it's a little bit later, 1902, but we're still peaking out around 22. The current level is still below 22. So even when they adjusted it, they didn't adjust it enough to make it
Yes,
the
but
case.
if you look at it, it looks like it will. It kind of looks like it slopes up, but it's
Yeah.
really around the same if
Yeah.
you look at it with a sharp
The
eye.
only thing that's really upward sloping is the adjustments. Now, does that make sense that a random error would occur all on one side?
No, it wouldn't.
That, to me, strikes me as manipulation, not an error.
Yeah.
Right? Because are you telling me that globally across the board, all these weather stations that are independent of each other had the same type of error? I'm not buying it. Okay? So what you're telling me is, once again, this is how anyone in a classroom can debunk their teacher. All they've got to do is you go to the GIST website like this. You just shop around, find something in the middle of nowhere.
Not buying
There's another one. Look at this. I just picked one out of the blue.
Let's take
It
a
goes
look.
back to 1897. That covers the 1902, and it has a 0. It has a 0 BI. And so let's take a look here.
Which again is the urban heat island.
Oh,
effect.
look at here. This one has a little bit of warming to it.
Yeah.
Okay, but not much. Not much. It does have a little spike here, but once again, remember Dr. Mann's data stops in 1990. So as you can see, between 1902 and when Dr. Mann did his research, it was below. Now,
But again, this is in
suddenly,
the tropics, so.
yeah, suddenly something happened here that there's a huge gap. But once again, you're telling me CO2 didn't gap that would have given this thing big of a change.
Yeah,
And so once again, you can kind of see that this is, here is 1902 when Professor Mann did it, and then here is when Professor Mann did his research, which ended about right here. So even so, the period on which the hockey stick is based, once again, shows a downward trend. Okay, well that's two for two. Let's find another one. All right,
let's go over to the other side of the
Let's go up to maybe Russia. Oh, that was another thing you wanted to tell me. You wanted to make sure people did it from all the different hemispheres.
Yes.
Okay,
We don't want to focus on one side.
Yeah, you wanted to show that this was a global phenomenon.
That's a little
Well,
high.
Let's find some zeros. We'll go up and
Maybe we need to flip.
let's see here. Oh, there's one. Let's take a look here.
And
All right. Now, okay. Well, once again, we see the same type of a thing. Back in 1902, you're around 3 degrees. Okay. Now in 2000, it shows there's a gap here, but once again, you're around maybe 2 degrees, maybe 2.5 degrees. But as you can see, once again, it all stays within a relatively close pattern.
This does not
and
look
once
concerned.
again, this is the period of Dr. Mann's chart, and it's flat as a board. Now, for some reason,
they decide to
right
make
after
this chart.
right after Al Gore makes his movie, all these things just take a spike up. But once again, there's nothing about the movement of CO2 that would cause a spike
Yeah,
up.
the quantum physics-
And we know that they've been adjusting the data. So I'm not putting too much value on this recent data, but this is the unadjusted historical data, and it pretty much shows flat as a board during Professor Mann's era. Now let's go take a look at another one. Where's another one with a? Oh, there's one. See if this is a long-term one. Okay, and once again, what do I see? Once again, 1902 is right about here. 2000 is actually right about here. And so once again, flat temperatures over the period on which Dr. Mann is showing a raise of 1.5 degrees Celsius. Now, we just randomly selected those, and we were able to show that most of the ones that we found with the zero BI showed no warming at all. So that's a random selection, and you're telling me this is a pretty good science fair experiment, and you'd encourage everybody in their classroom that when your teacher gets on this topic, go to the GISS, Surface Temperature Analysis, VI. Okay, once again, the website is data.gis.nasa.gov, and take a look at these.
And show your teachers some of these charts.
Charts and say, how can you explain no warming when over the last 100 years, when you controlled, and control is a scientific term, is what you're telling me. You're controlling for the urban heat island effect, and you were saying that there's even more things that you can control for, but we're just doing the heat island effect right now. Okay. Any last comments before we wrap this one up? Professor Backflip, you got a big grin on your face. You kind of like this, don't you? You like saying, Dr. Mann, I'm a 14-year-old kid, and I can figure this stuff out better than you, right? And you're saying, take back that Nobel Prize and give it to us, the teenage super sleuths, because we're doing real science, not that hokey-pokey stuff you're doing at the University of Penn State.
And make sure to check out our other videos.